boy, Roy George Philip, the first.
And I'm Samantha Bunzey.
This is Masculinity.
The show that investigates the performance of masculinity in the world today. And you know we spell it with a hard K.
So, Samantha, we're on the back half of a two-parter.
Yeah, and part one was amazing. Joseph, a.k.a. Pico, a.k.a. the hip-hop scholar, and Tyler, my Beneath the Mask bestie, they dropped so much rich knowledge, and we wanted to give you some time to just chew on it all, you know?
I mean, I could tell you were having a lot of fun, and you know what?
Pray tell, Ramoy.
Cue your drum roll, please. Perfect. Best drum roll I've ever heard in my life. After that drum roll, I will say, I, too, had fun.
Wait, what? Ramoy, George Philip the First, had fun with music?
Yo, enjoy it while you can, you know? Enjoy it.
Wow. Hey, more importantly, audience, you heard it here first. RGP1, he expressed his emotions.
Look, I do. Yeah, I have emotions, and I'm just doing my job modeling good masculinity here, okay?
Okay, but which one are you performing?
And back to that last topic.
Oh, a man not wanting to share his emotions. Couldn't be true. How novel.
Okay. Right, but for reals, yeah, this music, it's been a really good time.
You know what? It really has.
And with that knowledge in mind from both of us, I think it's time for me to get ready for it. Gonna put you in the hot seat, Samantha.
Wait, what? I'm sorry, what's happening?
Well, okay, Samantha, I think it's time that you and me and you go beneath the mask.
I think you forgot how Instagram works, which isn't surprising.
No, I think it's special to get it here coming from you, especially here on the pod. So, like these connections between music and gender, or music and patriarchy, all the good and bad and good, like it's been on your brain for a minute. Why is that?
You know, I think I love music. You know, I would say that music is like one of my favorite pieces of art, favorite types of art. And I think we just have to question the kind of stuff that we unconsciously consume, right? So music is kind of like TV, or at least the way that TV was intended, where you're supposed to put it on the background, kind of like passively enjoy it. And we learned a lot of trope from TV, you know, and I feel like we learned a lot of tropes from music as well about masculinity and gender. So we just got to question it a little bit, you know?
No, I can catch that. And I guess, what are you hoping the audience gets out of this series?
I think the way that we identify with our favorite singers, our favorite celebrities, like, I think I want us to question why. I want us to question, like, the different ways that we interpret gender from those performances, from those celebrities, from that art, how that's impacted us, and really just take a look at that, you know? And then, of course, the fact that there's really good music out there that is challenging masculinity with a hard K. So that's there too.
Yeah, you can actually take a lot of looks at a lot of that, because if you haven't cut in your inboxes already, Samantha actually led the charge on our Masculinity taking over our presenting sponsor, that's Next Gen Men, their weekly newsletter. That was a couple weeks ago, where she reported more timely music and gender insights. So, do you want to tell the listeners what you covered there?
Yeah, so, you know, that song, I Used to Love Her by Common, is actually the perfect history of hip hop. And in that song, Common kind of laments the same commercialization that we were lamenting with Nalo Zidane, right? And so I really just wanted to talk about that, and also talk about the Grammys, right? Like, Jay-Z accepted the Dr. Dre Global Impact Award while defending the fact that Beyonce had not gotten the Album of the Year. And I'm like, there's a lot to unpack there. What do you mean Dr. Dre Global Impact Award? You know?
There's a lot to unpack there. Maybe I should too. And we can all go read that back issue by visiting nextgenmen.ca/future. Samantha's All Things Music coverage doesn't and didn't stop there. Last week on our IG live show, Beneath the Mask. And yes, I do know how Instagram works.
Do you though?
Sort of. Anyways, I know Tyler Bunzey joined you to talk about how awesome I was. Am I right?
I mean, I wouldn't focus on that one too much. No, we did.
I mean, I would, but...
but we also talked about, like, the different ways that hip hop is judged, right? According to these, you know, racial, like, hierarchies and stuff that we hold in society, how that impacts our understanding of gender and masculinity, and how there's been so many women that have been forgotten in not just the fact that they were present for the start of hip hop, but that they contributed to shaping how the genre actually is today, right? There's like this notion that women were there but operating on the margins, and it's important to recognize, their artistry and their contributions to the actual music and art of hip hop. So he had a lot of great things to say.
Well, there's a lot to consider and a lot of great things to kind of ruminate on, because now it's time for more Tyler and Joseph. Here in part 2 of When Hip Hop Unmasks Masculinity, Samantha talks further with our music scholars, working through all the good and bad ways the genre and gender have become entangled. So, without further ado, Samantha, take it away.
Roy.
Yes, Samantha.
Well, we have to take a break for our sponsor first.
Okay, yes, you are correct. Samantha, then, my bad. You take us to that break.
Well, you kind of already did that. Talking already, just like a man would.
Oh, yeah. I mean, modeling masculinity here. Good, bad, whatever. I'm just trying my best.
Well, after the break, y'all, if it's any consolation, you won't have to hear Ramoy talk about his emotions or do any talking at all, actually. Because I alone chop it up with our hip-hop scholars, Joseph and Tyler, touching upon all the intricacies between music and gender. So stick around.
Curious about next-gen men? We're a small part of a much larger movement to undefine masculinity for a brighter future. Our mission is clear: empower the next generation to use their curiosity, empathy, and courage to build a more equitable world. Join the Next Gen Men community as we learn and unlearn together. We're here to support boys and men to break free from limiting stereotypes. We're not just an organization, we're a catalyst for reimagining masculinity and fostering inclusivity. We're here to help open up possibilities for what men and boys can be. Explore the world of Next Gen Men at nextgenmen.ca and join the community to make a difference. Next Gen Men, shaping tomorrow's leaders one step at a time. Join us and help undefine masculinity and empower the next generation of men to lead with empathy and courage.
Welcome back. So, Joseph, I want to go to your book, right? So, Breakbeats in the Bronx. What was the inspiration for this book?
So imagine I'm in Madison, Wisconsin, circa 2006, 2007. Wonderful sociology department, but I remember distinctly, I walk into one of the rooms and we don't remember the last time a Black male graduated from this program. And it just kind of shakes you. It's tough. At the time, it was one of the best sociology programs in the department. I'm just intimidated and scared and really good scholars and people who are great mentors, but people don't always talk to you. And so that's probably when I started seriously listening to full albums. I've always been a fan of hip hop, but you play a couple of songs here, but I just bought a decent pair of headphones and I had it on all the time. And at the time I was taking sociological theory courses. And for me, everything could make sense if I can imagine the different characters and the players as hip hop people, right? So Weber says this, Durkheim says this, Zimmel says this. Who are these people in the hip hop world? And so I'll sort of play with that. Marx's Capital completely makes sense to me if you listen to American Gangster at the same time with it. If you listen, I kid you, I've never paid a ticket to go watch a movie twice at the theater, but I read Capital and then I go and watch American Gangster, and the whole thing just perfectly makes sense to me. And so I was doing that, and then obviously I wasn't doing well in the course. And so I would go talk to my advisor, my theory teacher, who ended up being my advisor a lot. And he'd be like, well, what are you listening to? You always have your headphones on. And he also became curious about hip hop. And so I would go, and the beautiful thing about it was he didn't know much about it. And so he just really asked basic questions about, well, how did this come about? Or what is this? Or what was, and I kept regurgitating the same thing that I was reading from Trisha Rose or, Jeff Chang or any of these books. And the more I said my own answers to it and put on a little bit of social theory, the more I wasn't as convinced by what I was reading, what I was learning about the history of hip hop. And one day he just sort of like, come, follow me. We go into the faculty lounge. He pulls out this paper. Um, it's called Things of Boundaries. It's this really like theory paper where the guy is trying to explain how social work, the occupation, came to be. And my theory advisor, my theory professor, my advisor tells me, everything you tell me about hip hop really sounds like how this guy talks about how social work came to be. Social work, the occupation, came to be. It took me about 3 years to really understand what he was saying, but he was absolutely correct. And so part of it was a way to almost save myself in graduate school, to like meld what I was learning there with this thing that's always been fascinating to me. It was a way of slowly recognizing that there's the history of hip hop hasn't been completely told well. And it was a way for me to think through what has become for me my theoretical interest in sociology. And so it's a gift of a project that taught me how to write, taught me how to begin a really long process and bring it all the way to an end. And so I always say if this book never got published, I still would have gotten what I needed from it, which is learning about this art form and learning how to write and learning how to write a book and learn how to get rejected a lot when you're trying to pitch a project to somebody. And so it gave me so much. And so that's how it came about. And I'm glad that today it makes some kind of contribution to our understanding of hip hop.
And to be clear, by some kind of contribution, he means it is one of the greatest books to be written about the early years of hip hop. And it equips scholars like myself and like other folks to be able to think about hip hop humbly and to be able to kind of think critically about narratives that are given to us and why they exist and all of that. So, Joseph has he never touts enough of the power of this book. I've read a shit ton of books about, these early years, oral histories, everything. This is one of the only critical books for me that is required reading if you want to learn about hip hop. In fact, I just gave it to a high schooler a couple weeks ago who wanted to learn about it.
I would like to second that because honestly, researching for hip hop and like trying to think through masculinity and feminism and all these things, like, it wasn't really until recently that there was like this, people made the connection about women having always been involved in hip hop. And you were one of the only sources that I was able to find on the topic, where like really the only one. And I would venture to say that even the sources that have come out since really like, you've got the ladies first hip hop documentary and all these things, but, they don't give that sociological outlook. Right. So I, want to, also second that with my own kudos and thanks. And I would love to know, why was it so important for you to include, women's involvement in the inception of hip hop?
Yeah. Well, I appreciate y'all both saying that. It means a lot. It means a ton. I spend a lot of time around people who know music and music very well. And it's always humbling to hear that. So I really appreciate it. I think for me, like some of these things are really, I approached because I didn't know a lot. Like I was writing, just like you all have mentioned, and we all are always looking for the book about the thing that we're curious about. And it's really disappointing when you don't see that it exists, right? And so that's what I was trying to do. And so, we say, hip hop is a masculine space. My simple question always is like, how? Why? There's nothing inherent about making music or making any kind of music for that matter that should be Black music for that matter. That should be like men get to do this, women don't get to do this thing. And so this book, from anything about why is there only 4 elements of hip hop? Why not 5? Why not? I feel like this book is I have a 2-year-old now who's like starting to ask why. Like for me, this book is that. It's like, why this? Well, why that? Well, why is hip hop a Black thing? And the crazy thing is the answers are there if we just like allow ourselves to ask some of these basic questions. So I have a hard time answering that questions because I'm like, why the hell wouldn't anybody write about that? Because it's like that, it don't make sense to me that like we wouldn't write about that. And write about it in a way that I think it's interesting, that it's a basic like feminist theory ideas, right? Masculinities is always constructed in and around in conversation with femininity and all sorts of ways of doing gender, like Judith Butler taught us so long. You see what I'm saying? So like all of that stuff has always been there. Why aren't we using that to think and talk about hip hop? And finally, for me, it was I got lucky, man. Like, and this is always part of doing research or making anything, movies, documentary. I got lucky. Troy Smith was brilliant. I simply said, "Hey, you've interviewed a bunch of men. Where are the women at?" He's like, you right, young brother, you right. Let me go find them." And then he went and he did it, and he would talk to them, and he would bring it back, and I'm like, "But you didn't ask this question." He's like, "Man, I don't know what you're talking about. How about I call him? I'll put you on the phone and you ask your questions." And so he would do that a few times, and it was just a beautiful, beautiful project. I'm in the cold in Wisconsin, and he's in Harlem, and we just had this back and forth relationship that to this day I can text him, or we send each other Christmas cards, right? So it's just that this project grew me up so much, and I learned so much for it.
That's awesome. So I now kind of want to like fast forward to now, right? So using the same lens of this book, like how do you feel now that hip hop has evolved with regard to masculinity, or has it? I mean, you've said a little bit about this, but if you could deepen a little bit.
Yeah. So I think this is one of the reasons why I appreciate you all welcoming my co-instructor, my friend, my collaborator and partner in this conversation, because I think um, I have really, after this book, I really like has retreated into like the really fan consuming of hip hop. And I don't know about y'all, but as we all getting older, there's a harder time getting into what's happening today, right? Like I'm really staying into a very particular moments where we keep listening to it. One of the things, as I mentioned earlier, that's fascinating to me is how um, the sexuality politics in hip hop has at once transformed a great deal in terms of what people say on wax, and have remained the same in terms of who is let into the tent of hip hop. So for me, that's crazy, right? Like we can be so progressive to not be as homophobic on record as we used to be, and still be so bounded that you know queer folks aren't always as represented as performers in hip hop, and that dichotomy is still really really important and interesting. I think hip hop is in some ways been more fascinated with bisexual women than they have been with any other group of people doing their masculinity. So that's also really, really interesting. Um, but I think about some of the old guards, and I think about Jay-Z having an interview and saying, if Obama said this, then I also have to say this. And now Jay-Z's putting his mother on record, who's like that kind of stuff is like 1997 Jay-Z wouldn't have the courage to do that. And so that's cool to see. But I, that's what I would say about how it continues to transform. If anybody, I've always thought that like there's a next chapter and a next chapter of a book that could be written about this. But I think what I try to do is like, let's not take any aspect of let's not take for granted the structures of hip hop. Let's keep asking questions as to why did this aspect become what it is, and learn from it, and try to make really understand what the space or the field of hip hop looks like today.
Great. So actually, I want to go back to this question of gatekeepers, right? And who is like led into the tent of hip hop, so to speak. And I want to hear what both of you have to say about this, because I know that you have a lot of industry insight as well, Tyler. So like, do you think that when it comes to the hip hop industry gatekeepers, like they're still primarily men? It sounds like it. Like I'm thinking about like the Jay-Z's or the Damon Dashes, the Diddy's, God forbid. Like who get, and like the people who get to make decisions in this culture, right? Like,
Yeah, so it's an interesting question because I don't think that there's a straightforward answer. Mainly because hip hop culture Like, I think for a while you could talk about hip hop as being underground, and then hip hop as being underground, burgeoning into the commercial, but you still have to go through the underground going into the commercial, right? And then at one point, then you have the underground that's completely separate from the commercial, and then it all just kind of gets really messy, right? You've got the people who are kind of commercial but indie, and then you've got the people who are not commercial at all. You got people who don't ever cut records, but live hip hop as a religious practice in their everyday. Like, so what I'm saying is essentially, it's very hard to gatekeep something that has no gates. I had the privilege of learning under Ninth Wonder at Duke, and one thing that he has said multiple times is that it's like playing in the NBA, but everybody gets a jersey. So it's like who is gatekeeping? So like when we're talking about, I think the consumer, when we're talking about commercial hip hop, which often when we're talking about hip hop, we're talking about commercial hip hop, right? The consumer is the gatekeeper. Like whatever sells will, like if it sells, we'll take it, right? And I think one thing that we haven't really talked about yet is the racialized consumption of gender in hip hop. What I mean by that is like white men love a certain kind of hip hop. That kind that's hyper masculine and aggressive and has all of those stereotypes of the kind of hyper masculine black male, right? And so for many people, hip hop is a conduit to which they can know their gender through an exaggeration of gender, right? So I think on one hand, one of the reasons you're not seeing this is because white men don't want to take cues on masculinity from gay men. And I think that is or from queer men or from even queer women. I think that that's a very important, thing to kind of gesture towards here. I think in terms of also when we're thinking about who gets in, who gets circulated and so on, we also, one of the other people I had the privilege of learning from at Duke was Mark Anthony Neal. And he has this book that, locates masculinity on a scale of legible, not a scale, but, he talks about illegible masculinities, right? Especially with black men, people like Luther Vandross having a illegible form of masculinity. And so when we think about that, I think we have to think about how gender scripts have shifted from, what we're talking about Jay-Z 97 to today, and how, for example, Jay-Z can talk about going to therapy on 444, but maybe we're not going to have an out rapper at the same time, right? Meaning there's a certain degree of softness, a certain degree of breaking down these scripts, and maybe not breaking them down, but at least re-articulating them into a different space. But I don't know necessarily that the consumer has a legibility for the masculine bravado of hip hop in a queer male body. Now with a young MA, she's embodying, like there is on the Ladies First documentary, they said, some consumers can't even tell if she's like, they thought she was a man or something like that, right? Because she embodies a certain kind of masculinity that fits in her version of butch femme queer womanhood, right? But I think for queer men like myself, I don't think that there's a reflection of that kind of space or a reflection of that kind of masculinity, because that kind of masculinity is seen as thoroughly still not like aberrant, but like violating the notion of what masculinity is supposed to be.
That is such important context. Because I mean, as we're talking about like understanding masculinity and, hip hop in a wider lens, right? It's important to have like all these different contexts and all of these different things. And I love what you say about the consumer, because really, this really speaks to kind of like our complicity, right? In this like performance of masculinity, so to speak, right? What we talk about when we say masculinity with a hard K, it's like that is like a national, international sport that we're literally all playing it every moment of every day. Everybody gets a jersey, like you said, right? So I appreciate that point. And so now I kind of want to switch gears into your teaching experience, right? So you're co-teachers. I would love for you guys to talk a little bit about, what it is that you co-teach.
It's your course. You should start. It's yeah.
No. So it's just one of my favorite classes that I've taught over and over and over again. It's called Hip Hop and Urban Sociology. So the objective of the course is to try to think about social problems that urban Americans face. We have 4 main units. I'm a sociologist, I'm an urban sociologist, so this is a really nice way for me to continue to read about different branches of urban sociology that in my own research I don't get to touch as much. So we're thinking about unit one is economic inequality. Unit two is housing and residential segregation. Unit three is crime, violence, and punishment. And unit four, which we both really like, is inequalities in intimate life. And that's where we actually get to talk a lot about some of this. I mean, we might dig through and assign some of y'all podcasts as assignments, right? It's the space where we talk about anything from like associations. Who are you friends with? Who are you associating yourself with? To your intimate life, right? Who are you partnering up with? Who gets picked and who doesn't get picked as much? Thanks to online dating, we have a ton of data on who gets liked and thumbed up and swiped left and swiped right, and then who gets to marry or partner up and who doesn't get to do that and what does it mean? And then it sinks all the way to the self. Like, how do you come to define who you are? And then all of this, we're looking at social, at least as I taught it, right? I used to look at just social science research about each of these four units, and then what hip hop music is saying about each of these four units. And bringing Tyler as part of the class is really expanding it. So now it's not just what the hip hop music is saying, but how is it saying what it's saying as well. And so there's a really nice aesthetic analysis of the music to also help us look at these same four topics. So that's the heart of it. Probably one of the cool features of the class is the hip hop brackets. So there are 30, we try to get around 32 students in the class. Every student is assigned a rapper.
Why could you? I want to go to your university.
Yes,
Where was this when I was in school? What?
It's because we are all trying to create the class that we wanted to take. So if you have Jay-Z as we're teaching you about economic inequality and we're listening to all this music that's and Tyler's teaching us about the aesthetics of it, we teach you the national level conversation. You're paying attention to what's going on in Brooklyn. Or if you have, Bunzey, you paying attention to what's going on in Houston. But, on the side is like the truest essence of hip hop, the battle. And so 4 different regions, north, south, east, west, ranked from 1 to 8 in each region. Yes.
Wait, you're like doing like the March Madness of like the hip hop bracket?
You damn right. So you come to class.
I was robbed. Okay.
You play one song. I play one song. The class votes on who advances. And the dope thing is now we're not like picking who advances based on whatever nonsense we have in mind. Tyler has taught us how to listen to hear the sublime.
Oh.
And so because of that, there's a lot better language on what's going on. And it goes all the way. And then, we got the final 4 in the finals. And if you win, your name gets etched on the trophy that lives on forever.
This is amazing. I mean, so there's so many sociological aspects to what you're talking about. I mean, I want to ask you what led you to specifically include masculinity in these courses. I feel like it's inherent, but can you just talk a little bit about that frame of mind?
For me, it's the last unit on inequalities in intimate life. And the intimate life essentially is like, how does one get to discover themselves? How does one get to understand themselves? But I think, and Tyler, I'd love for you to jump in. What we've been really trying to pay attention to this whole semester is how do we continue that conversation, not just in the intimate life section, but it really does have strong implications in economic inequality and housing and crime, violence, and punishment. So we're trying to really push it all across. And sociologically, I can tell you, women get evicted more than men. Why? Because, you throw an eviction notice to a man, he could come to you and be like, I'm not paying that. Like there's actually like a eviction and the reproduction of poverty or something like that. Like there's papers that talk about this. Men perform their masculinity in a way that they can go and cuss out the landlord and they say, okay, fine, don't evict me. I'll paint or I will fix that thing that's broken. And you know what women do? They evade. They don't. Like you just don't want to see the person. So you just stay away and you da-da-da. And because you're doing that, you get tossed out much quicker and you actually end up getting we can trace all of this stuff, the performances of gender in a lot of different things. And we can also see it in how the music happens. So we've been trying to do that a little bit better this semester.
So you have this class coming up about making it in the music industry, right? Like I saw you have you can sign up on Eventbrite, everyone. So given all the news that we've been hearing about the inner workings of the industry, right? And a lot of news is the scandal. And a lot of things are just more insight into how the industry works. I'm wondering, would you say that you have a kind of a gender diverse classroom? Like, are you seeing, gender nonconforming folks as well as men, as well as women, as well as people kind of along the gender spectrum?
Yeah, I would say generally, let's see. I know at Smith, HBCUs skew towards women. There tend to be usually a majority of women who enroll in HBCUs. And so normally my classes are around 60 to 70% women. I've had a few all women classes as well. And, in terms of outward presentation of queer identities or outward claiming of queer identities, that I think that's a little bit more rare. But I think that there is a range of gender presentation and gender curiosity in a lot of my classrooms.
I have a question then. Do you offer, in terms of like breaking into the industry, dealing with the industry, just in terms of, that advice, do you offer different advice for people based on their gender identity?
Well, I think I don't necessarily teach people how to get into the industry. What I aim to do with my work is try to bridge artists and students, right? Because I work as a journalist on the side for the Queen City Nerve. So I've been in community with a lot of artists, both in and without the academy. And so like what you're seeing on that event is actually me speaking to some of my friends, in contacts who are R&B singers, saying, hey, do you want to come on campus and do a training for students who would be interested in careers like this? Because more often than not, these careers are non-linear, so then schools don't pick them up. By non-linear, I mean you get a marketing degree, you work at a marketing firm, you have a marketing career. It's just right there for you, right? The arts industries are not like that. They're internship-based, networking-based. You work for free here and do this, and then maybe you get a bite here or something like that, right? So one of the things that I'm trying to do with a little bit of grant funding is build these pathways and connections so that there is kind of a mentorship, apprenticeship opportunity instead of students having to go out and try to build those relationships from scratch themselves. So I'm not necessarily giving that advice, but I am very conscious about who I connect with students and who I connect students to. And I say that in the sense of, like, I want to make sure that many women of different, positions, including managers, including A&R folks, including, not just the people in front of the camera, are talking to students. I want to make sure the queer people are talking to students. Because when a student sees someone who is practicing in a space they want to be in, who looks like them or sounds like them or holds any identity that they had, then all of a sudden that thing that is just a dream becomes only a couple of steps away. And so part of this, as someone who is very dedicated to arts education at an institution that has gutted most of our arts education, and I'll put Smith on blast for that right now, we've gutted almost all of our arts programming, that, there's this imperative, especially for Black students right now, to have opportunities to pursue careers in the arts, because we're basing our education on labor markets, trying to put people in Bank of America, trying to put people in Novant Health in Charlotte. We are not basing our education on what an entire student needs and wants. These are the same issues that W.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington were debating at the turn of the century, and they're the same issues that are coloring us today. They just look a little bit different and they wear different suits. And so, for me, part of this is insisting insurgently in some ways that the arts matter and that there are ways to get careers in the arts, funders be damned. And sorry, I feel very passionately about this. So you asked a serious question to me,
No, this is great. Thank you so much for being here. This was like such an amazing interview. Like your insight, your contextualizing was actually extremely like indispensable. So just want to really shout you guys both for that. But before we go, I just want to see if you guys have anything that you want to plug. Is there anything that our audience should be looking out from either or both of you?
Yeah, audience should just keep listening to this podcast and tell everybody and their mamas to keep listening to this podcast. That's my plug. We appreciate
Thank you.
being here. This is a super beautiful space that y'all building. So keep on keeping on.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and for anyone who wants to fund a researcher, I can be bought, and I respond well to any price, really. So I will sell out. Just name a price and I'm yours.
Tyler writes, man, and so all seriousness, if you're looking for somebody to cover a piece, to cover an event, to cover do an interview, like he goes in on these things, and his pieces at QC Nerve around here matter. So and it's not. I'm telling you, it's not just the class. He will have Rhapsody in the classroom talking. He would we just get he would have whoever in. We have who we have in our class last week?
His little brother, Ninth Wonder, and we had Rod Digger come through too.
Exactly. We have Rod Digger Skype into our class, right, y'all. Like
that's amazing.
It was beautiful.
Wow.
So
shout out to both of you for doing the work. So if you actually could let the people know where to find you on the socials, any websites or anything like that, we'll definitely post it on our website.
I'm the only black man at the sociology department at Davidson College. You can find me. Easy.
Oh.
My social game is weak because I'm getting old.
You can find me at tbunzey, TBUNZEY, both on Instagram and Twitter. I kind of hide from social media sometimes, but I always like to hear from folks and connect with folks. So always reach out.
These two, they just can't not bring the heat.
They really always do, and it's really such a joy to have them on.
Well, Samantha, what's coming next?
Well, we have one more music episode in this music series. I'm kind of sad at this ending. And it's actually coming out next week.
Wait, like a week from today?
Yeah, that is how a week works for more.
Thank you very much.
That's when we'll be talking with a fellow podcast host, Podbro, and looking at all the global connections, especially in Latin America, between music and masculinity.
Look, I know this is going to be like heresy, especially for this conversation, but I think I'm anti-Bad Bunny.
Oh my God. Are you trying to get masculinity canceled? What? Because I think you just did.
Yeah, no, is it on speed dial anywhere, anybody? Restorative justice?
Oh my God. Anyways, you can learn more about our music series along with additional supplemental information over at masculinitypod.com. Head over there ASAP, where you can also catch our growing archive of the previous Beneath the Mask episodes. Check it out.
Yeah, while you're at it, whatever podcast app you're listening to us on right now, go ahead and leave us a review. 5 stars does sound pretty nice. Those reviews really do go to help get our show in more people's ears and help us grow this conversation as a community.
Well, another good one down.
It was a good one. And until next time, I'm your boy, Ramoy George Phillip, the first.
And I'm Samantha Nzesi. Thank you for listening.
Peace.
Ciao. And I'm Masculinity. Oh my God. Yo, talk about a Freudian slip.